so you'll need me to go again.
Let's give this another shot. Sorry about that. I forgot to hit the go live, and we did the first 5-10 minutes of it streaming out to nobody. So hopefully this time works a little bit better. I'll start things off by mentioning that we will be giving away some prizes in the Slack channel. So if you want to hang out in that Slack channel, we have a winner picker that we will pick some random videos out of. I hear, sounds like right now I might be echoing. I'm not sure why. So I guess the other thing to add is today is Matt's on vacation today, so I'm actually running the stream by myself. But we'll go ahead and get right into it. First thing that we have to share with you is we have a short video from our sponsor that we'll kick things off with.
Technology is a vital part of any company. The key in business is talent like you to make it all work. From artificial intelligence and cybersecurity to development, we understand these are more than buzzwords. This is your career. At Arias Group, we understand the challenges and the complex nature of this fast-paced, dynamic field. We focus on listening and understanding what is important to you in your next career move. The IT world is filled with experts like you, who come with years of experience and specialized skill sets. We provide a platform to help you grow and shape your career in a variety of ways. Whether you're looking for a consultant role or a direct hire position, we use our extensive network and industry insight to connect you with rewarding opportunities and help you reach your career aspirations. Whether you're an architect or an analyst, a network engineer, or a project manager, our tenured team can help you make the next move that's right for you. Consider advancing your career with us as a consultant and work on innovative projects and emerging technology. A consultant role can be more valuable than one stretch of work with a single company. Your critical thinking and problem-solving skills will bring added value to teams and top employers in a dynamic fashion. When you demonstrate your ability to adapt, perform, and navigate project challenges within the consultant environment, you'll put yourself at a competitive advantage in the market. When it comes to choosing your next project or full-time role, choose us to help you in your search. We understand that the strength of technology lies in the people behind it. That's you. Start your search today with Arias Group.
All right, and I have Bruce here with us to share a few words with us.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the May.net user group this evening. I'm Bruce Peterson, Regional Manager of the IT branch of Arias Group, and we appreciate the opportunity to sponsor this month's meeting and Sunil's presentation. For those of you who may not be familiar with our Arias Group, we are a full-service talent and staffing organization, not only specializing in IT, but also accounting and finance and executive search. We have been part of a larger organization known as CNA Industries, which has been in business for more than 50 years. Some of our sister companies you may have also heard of, Arias Medical, our staff, and Celebrity Staff. In October of last year, CNA Industries was acquired by a great local company by the name of Medical Solutions. We are very excited about our future as a new combined company. Our size and diversification of business has provided a great deal of stability through these difficult times, and for this, we are truly blessed. I did want to make you aware of one internal opportunity that we have with our new company for a senior .NET developer position. As you can imagine, combining two large organizations, there's a lot of IT work to do, and we have a great opportunity to be a part of that team right now and help transform our IT solutions to help deliver to the new company's vision. So if you might be inclined to be interested in something like that or know of somebody who is, please reach out to me in the Slack channel, and I'll try to post my contact information out there for you as well. Wanted to leave you with a couple of interesting little factoids, data points from a recent DICE survey from the month of May here. Number one, this probably comes as no surprise, but 72% of IT professionals very much enjoy working from home. I trust that many of you, at this meeting tonight feel the same way. The other thing that you might find interesting is that 31% of IT professionals said they plan to look for a new opportunity in the next 2 weeks. And that's fresh data right here from the month of May. So people are active, they're excited about the possibilities, and they should be. IT has survived this pretty well. IT salaries have continued to trend up even during these difficult conditions. So sit back, enjoy the presentation, and take a deep breath and know that the economic recovery has already begun and there are good times ahead. Thanks. Thank you again.
All right, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Sunil, who will be talking to us today about the Microsoft Bot Framework.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing good and are safe and sound during this pandemic. I appreciate you taking time out for this meeting. I'm Sunil Rathod. Today I'm here to deliver the presentation on Microsoft Bot Framework. A little bit about me. I'm an application developer at Farm Credit Services of America here in Omaha. I have 12 years of experience building web applications based on Microsoft technologies, including Azure. I'm a Microsoft certified Azure Developer Associate, and I'm a Scrum certified developer as well. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Sunil Rathod K, and you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. So let's just get started. When someone says the term bot, the first image that comes in people's mind is this. A machine performing some task, but really a bot is an application that performs an automated task. The simplest use case is a chatbot. For example, you might have seen websites where you get a chat window offering you help to perform a certain task and providing you more information through chatting. Another example is smart voice-based bots such as Cortana, Siri, Google, Alexa. When you ask Google what's the weather outside, it would take your request and find the information and respond back to you through voice-based channel. Everything happens without any intervention of human being, and that is a bot. So why should we learn about bot? So let me take you 25 years ago, and let's think about how technology has progressed through all these years. What was the most efficient way of communication back then? Some of you would think email. But after a decade or so, if you wanted to send a short message to someone, you wouldn't use email. Rather, SMSs became the talk of the town during that time. So if you flash forward to today, we have lots of medium of communication. We have social media platforms like Facebook, Slack, Twitter. Smart speakers are making their way to our home. With all these exposure, there is a big opportunity to get people's attention through bots. That's why companies have started focusing more and more on these mediums, because that's where the audience is. So let's just take a look at a high-level view on how the bot communication really happens. So on one side, we have a user, and on the other side, we have a bot. The way both would communicate to each other is through channel. So let's say user uses a keyboard, or if it's a voice-based device, uses the microphone to talk to the channel. And then the way bot communicates with the channel is through APIs. So a channel is a medium in which bot communicates. Channel entertains various ways of interaction for users and exposes APIs for communication with bot. So now that we know what a channel, like channels are like Facebook or Skype or Slack. So now that we know what a channel is and what a bot is, how would somebody go and build a bot? So there are many ways one can build a bot. The easiest would be a keyword-based bot with one medium. So you can imagine it as a simple console-based application wherein you are taking a string as an input and reacting to that string. You're based on the string, your program just does some work. So you build such a bot which just reacts to one keyword. And often in these kind of in these kind of bots, the medium is text-based medium. So if we add one more difficulty level, then one can think of adding multiple mediums or custom messaging, but still keyword-based. So when I say custom messaging capabilities, that means the different kind of formats like links, buttons, and images. The hardest to build would be a bot which has the power of understanding the user's language, like the natural language processing, and which also supports the multiple mediums and custom messaging capabilities. So building bot with such capabilities from scratch would be really difficult. Hence, Microsoft came up with a framework that helps us achieve all these abilities easily. And this framework is called the Microsoft Bot Framework. So Microsoft Bot Framework is a comprehensive framework for building enterprise-grade conversational AI solutions. It was introduced in Build Conference 2016 and is currently at version 4 and can be downloaded from this URL from GitHub. It supports multiple channels and has the ability to process the natural language processing through the cognitive service offered by Microsoft. So if you take a look at this diagram, this shows the various components that are involved in a typical bot solution. So on the left hand side, you can see user with all the different abilities of inputting, like for example tap. If it's a mobile device, the user can type, tap, speak, and adaptive cards. There are these various devices wherein this bot solutions can be embedded into, and the channels. So the channels here are like Skype, Facebook, email, SMS. So Azure Bot Service makes that integration with channels, a piece of cake for us. It's quite easy. You will see that in demonstration today. If you look at Bot Framework also speech APIs, the vision APIs to add in the cognitive capabilities into the solution, as well as Q&A maker service, which is basically a FAQ style service wherein you just provide some question and answers. So basically that service adds the natural language understanding capability on top of that, so that if one question is asked in multiple ways, the bot is able to figure out the right answer for that question. Like the Q&A maker service is able to do that and return you the right answer. So, and all of this is available as a service. So you just need to use that service in the solution. Another key component in that cognitive world is language understanding. It's again the service provided by Microsoft, which has the ability to understand users' intent and provide you with the detail of what was the intent and the entities involved in it. So we will be looking at language understanding in today's demo. Dispatch allows us to router calls or separate them based on, like, if you want to send it to a skill-based bot or Q&A maker bot or any third-party code. So when I say skill-based bots, so skills are nothing but a library of reusable conversational skills. So Microsoft has built already like mail, point of interest, automotive, all these different domains. The skill library is built for, has all these already created library that we can just integrate in our solution and use. So for example, calendar, you can imagine if all that code is already built for us, it would be quite easy for us to integrate into solution and just use those capabilities. So Microsoft is adding more to this list, and currently it is like whatever we are seeing in the screen, those are the skills available. So let's just take a look at what are the tools that are needed if one wants to build a bot solution. So we would need Visual Studio. Visual Studio extension for templates. That gives us the templates, normal templates, which would have the basic solution in it. We can build from there on top of it. It's not a requirement, but yeah, you can build on top of the basic solutions that come out of the box with those templates. You can build the bot in C#, JavaScript, which is Node.js is supported, and Python language. You would need something called as bot framework emulator. This allows us to do the development locally and test our bot locally, and we will be seeing the use of this in the demonstration today. So before we go and look at the demonstration, let's get some concepts, the fundamental concepts out of our way. So let's look at this this slide, which talks about connector service. So connector service sits right in between channel and bot. So there are various channels, and each has a different way of communicating. So connector service makes it easy for us to be able to connect with these channels. So all the channels would send channel data to connector service, which is the activity, like whatever user has typed into the chat box, or whatever detail the user has sent. And then connector service creates a JSON payload and sends it to the bot, and that's called an activity. So connector service helps us with that ability. So the activity object has user details, conversation details, and also something called as an activity type. Activity types. So here, if we look at this slide, we can see message is one of the activity type, which represents a communication between bot and user. Conversation update indicates whether a user was added to the to the conversation, or a bot was added to the conversation, or it was removed. Contact relation update activity type represents that a bot was added or removed from the user's contact list. Typing activity indicates that the user or bot is typing. Delete user data indicates that the user has requested to delete the data. So this is really useful in cases where we have to be compliant on GDPR policies. End of conversation indicates the end of the conversation. Event represents a communication sent to bot that is not visible to user. Sometimes we want to do certain actions which should not be, so user should not know about that. So we read based on those event activity type event, we do some action and user should not know about it. So we use activity type event in that case. And then trace is an activity which is useful for logging purposes, so that we can generate these conversation transcripts. Invoke is a reserved activity type for Microsoft Bot Framework. So whenever you would see it, you can kind of know why it is there. Message reaction, when you hit like button or if you are disliking things, then message reaction activity represents that kind of action. Installation update represents an installation or uninstallation of a bot within an organizational unit such as Teams. Message update and delete, kind of self-understood, is the activity that represents the deletion or update if somebody updates the message. Suggestion indicates a private suggestion to the recipient about another specific activity. So for example, you're doing a group chat, and then you are getting votes in that group chat. So you might want, as an administrator, you might want the result of that specific activity. Then suggestion activity type is useful in those cases. Handoff is a special activity when the bot wants to transfer the control to human being, the actual human being, and if the user is requesting that the control should be transferred to human being, then that activity is called as handoff. So those were some activity types. Let's take a look at a few more concepts here. A turn consists of the user's incoming activity to the bot and any activity that bot sends back to the user as an immediate response. So that one whole cycle is a turn. And a turn context object provides information about the activity, such as the sender and receiver, the channel, and other data needed to process the activity. So we will see this in code. That's where you will understand it a little bit more. In this diagram, the bot replied to the message activity with another message activity containing the same message. Basically, the processing starts with an HTTP post request with the activity information carried as a JSON payload. The adapter here plays an important role, and it's an integrated and core component of the SDK. The activity carried as a JSON in the HTTP post body, basically that adapter converts that into an activity object, which then is used by the adapter to create the turn context. So I'll be pointing that out in the code when we would do the code walkthrough here in a bit. So let's go ahead and take a look at the simple bot which just comes out of the template. So basically, when you go ahead and say new project, and if you have the SDK installed, then you type bot, you would get the option here like core bot. You would also get eco bot or empty bot. So this is all coming from the template. If you have installed the template, you will be able to see that. So EcoBot is the bot, which is the simplest bot. So if the user types in hi, the bot responds whatever the user had typed with eco attached to it. So we'll take a look at that so that we can solidify some of the concepts that we just talked about in the slide. So this solution is nothing but a simple API solution in .NET Core. So if you look at the bot controller, this is API messages is the endpoint. The bot controller is taking dependency on an adapter and a bot. So adapter is basically responsible for creating the turn context and activity object. And then bot is responsible to process that turn. And in that bot, when we process the turn, that's where we get chance to react to the activity or do work based on whatever is the activity. So let's take a look at startup.cs, where I have defined these dependencies. So for iBot framework HTTP adapter, we have a class called adapter with error handler. And for bot, it's ecobot. So let's take a look at adapter. So if you remember from the slides, we were saying that the adapter is responsible for creating the turn context for us. So if you take a look at, I'm stepping into the framework library and framework classes. So this is my custom class wherein I'm just reacting on turn error. If there is any error, in that case we are logging the error and we are sending a message to the user that there was an error. But let's take a look at the adapter class where the turn context gets created, and that's the framework class. So if you take a look at here, in the adapter, we have a method called process async, and that's the method that we call from this controller here. The controller, whenever somebody calls this endpoint, we call this method which calls the process async method of adapter and passes the request and the bot that we have injected here. So if you go back to the adapter class and look at that process async method, we can see that here it looks at the request, HTTP request, and creates that activity object. And then it sends it for processing further, wherein the turn context gets created. So you can look at here, line number 400, the turn context gets created. So I'm showing you this code just to make sure that the concepts are clear, and we know where the turn context is getting created and why the HTTP adapter class is important and why does it exist. So we have seen that adapter class, we call the process async class, providing it the bot. Now let's take a look at the bot. If you look at ecobot, it is implementing two methods, like overriding two methods from its base class. Now it does not inherit from iBot directly. Like you can inherit from iBot directly and implement the iBot interface directly and basically implement whatever you want to implement as the reaction to incoming activity. But Microsoft has done a great job by creating this activity handler class, which implements the iBot interface for us, and iBot interface has that on-turn async method, which gives us an opportunity to implement our logic to react on whatever incoming activity is. So if you look at activity handler class, it implements that on-turn async method for us, and what it is doing here is it is looking at what type is coming in the turn context's activity object. And based on the type, it is defining few classes here. So you might, if you remember the slide where I was talking about different activity types, you can see end of conversation, event, conversation update. These are various activity types, message being one of them. And it has these methods defined which we can override in our subclass and then act on that activity easily. So we get that separation of concerns right here very easily, and activity handler class makes that easy for us. So that's where now you understand why these methods are here and where they are coming from. So we can override all those methods based on the activity that we see in the type. On message activity async gets called when the activity type is message. So if you look at this method's parameters and arguments, we are getting turn context as a first argument, and second is cancellation token, which helps us to cancel the process. The turn context contains whatever activity the user has sent. So in this case, it's a message, and then if you say .text for a message activity, you get the value whatever the user has typed into the chat box. So here we are saying that get that value whatever user has sent and create a reply text string with echo added on top of it and send that back to user. So we can call the send activity async method on turn context, which takes in an activity type and the cancellation token. So again, you can see here, Microsoft comes back here and helps us create the activity type. So you can see here we have a message factory class which we can use to create either text or attachment or stuff like that, which we want to send back to the user. So in this case, we are just simply sending back the reply text, and you can see one more thing here, SSML. So basically, that is, if you look at its definition, if you go back and look at it, you see optional. It is completely optional. The text to be spoken by your bot on a speech-enabled channel. So I can imagine how much work Microsoft has put into this framework that takes care of the various scenarios that we want to deal with. So that's what this two line of code means. And here this method gets called whenever a user was added. This is a conversation update type of activity. Whenever a user got added to the conversation, then this method gets called. You can see the arguments of this method are turn context and the cancellation token, as well as we get the members that are added, like the channel list of channel accounts. Here we are saying that we want to greet the user when the user joins the conversation. So we are looping over the members added. This list will contain the bot as well as the members or the users that are there in the conversation. So we run on a for each loop here, and we say that we want to send this welcome text, which is hello and welcome string, back to the user only when the recipient ID is not equals to member ID. So for this incoming activity, the recipient is bot, and as the recipient is bot, we don't want to say hello and welcome to the bot itself. We want to say hello and welcome to the user, and that's where we just send this message only when the recipient ID is not equal, like member ID is not equal to the recipient ID. So that's what this logic means. So let me just run this real quick and see this in action. So my API is hosted at this location and is ready listening on this URL. Now I would like to introduce you to the broad framework emulator. This is the tool which is really helpful for developing the bot locally. So I clicked on open bot and selected the URL that was already there for me, but you can type the URL where your API is hosted, which is serving the bot. So, and you can connect. So when you connect, you see hello and welcome popped up here. So what happened was that conversation update activity was sent to the bot. So if you look on the right hand side in the emulator, you see the logs of the communication that is happening between the bot and the emulator right here. So you can see that here conversation update activity was sent to the bot, and this is how that activity object looks like. So when you click on that, you get the JSON view here, which tells you, like, gives you the information about what was being sent to the bot. So you can see here that the recipient is bot, and it is from the user. And this activity was conversation update, that the user has joined the conversation. And in response to that, bot has sent a message activity, and that contains the string hello and welcome. And if you look at that JSON, it tells you all the details of what the channel is and different properties of the activity. And you can see the type of activity here as well. So that's what this right hand side here is really useful for knowing what's actually going on between the bot and the user here. You see NGRock here. NGRock is a tunneling software. Basically, if your bot is hosted live into multiple channels like Facebook or somewhere, then NGRock basically comes handy in that case, where you just connect the bot remotely through NGRock settings. So NGRock comes in handy in those cases. So let me just type something here. Let's say hi, and as we saw, when you say hi, you send a message activity to the bot, which has the string hi, and you can see all the details here. And bot has responded with a echo hi, so you can see our code actually working here. So that's what got executed, and that's what we saw in the bot. Apart from this, in the emulator, you can save the transcript as well. And when you save that transcript, it becomes available here under resources. You also get a chance to restart this conversation either as a new user or same user. So if you restart this as a new user, everything just resets back. As well as you have something called in the bot emulator, you have something called as bot explorer. Here you can see, you can actually set up your services that you're going to use. So that gets saved in a bot configuration file. So in the beginning, when I came here, you might have seen that I clicked on the open bot and selected stuff here. But what if you just want to save this into some configuration file so that you don't have to do that again and again? You just load the .bot file, which is the configuration file, and it gets up and starts running. And that's the file where you can define your other services, like details of services like Q&A maker or Luis. So the bot .bot file would, if you had one, would show all the Luis or all the services right up here. So that's a quick tour of emulator and how it works. And we just saw a very simple application that was hosted. So at this point, I will take a pause and take in any questions if you have before moving forward.
So we did have one question. Asking if it worked with other frameworks such as Go.
I'm not sure on that, but I'll just find that out and send a reply after the session. All right, so let me go ahead and go back to the slides. So we know that we just saw that a simple bot which did not have any way of maintaining the state. So what about state management in bot? So as with web apps, a bot is inherently stateless. Uh, so for some bots, this simplicity is preferred, but for others, state is necessary for bot to have a useful conversation, such as where in the conversation the user is, or whatever the previously received data was about the user. Maintaining state allows the bot to have more meaningful conversations by remembering certain things about a user or conversation. For example, if you have talked to a user previously, you can save previous information about them so that you don't have to ask for it again. State management automates the reading and writing of bot state to underlying data storage layer. So state is stored as the state properties, which are effectively key value pairs that your bot can read and write through the state management object without worrying about the specific underlying implementation. So these state properties are lumped into 3 scope buckets. So that's called as the user state, conversation state, private conversation state. So user state will hold the data about the user. Conversation state holds the details about conversation, and private conversation state is good for channels that support group conversations, but where you want to track both user and conversation specific information. For example, if you had a classroom clicker bot, the bot could aggregate and display students' responses for a given question. So all these buckets are subclasses of bot state class, and we can derive from bot state class and create our own class and have different scope. So we would see that in code into our next demo. But yeah, that gives a little bit of understanding on like what a user state is and conversation state is. The next concept which we should understand is the state property accessor. State property accessors are used to actually read or write one of the state properties, and they provides get, set, and delete methods for accessing the state properties within a turn. To create an accessor, we must provide the property name. Then we can use that accessor to get and manipulate the state. The accessors allow the SDK to get state from the underlying storage and update the bot's state cache for us. So basically, it maintains a state cache. So it's just simple as that. Like any, I think you might have heard about cache aside pattern. So it is similar to that, wherein you just cache the current conversations of the turn, and like when you are done with the turn, you can call the save changes method to actually save that data to the storage layer, which can be your SQL Server, or it can be your SQL like Azure Blob or anything that you're using. So that's what it does. So I'll be pointing this out in the code when we look at the code. So the key point here is that we have to call the save changes method to make sure that the data is persisted. Another concept here is the concept of dialogues. Dialogues are a central concept in the SDK and provide a useful way to manage a conversation with the user. Each dialogue is designed to perform a specific task. We can specify the order of individual dialogues to guide the conversation and invoke them in different ways, sometimes in response to a user, sometimes from other dialogues. So we will see that in code as well when I'll be demoing. The dialogues library provides a few built-in dialogue types which make it easier to manage the conversation of the bot. Waterfall and prompt dialogues combine multiple steps. allowing the bot to follow a predefined sequence and pass information from one step to the next. Prompt dialogues are designed to work with waterfall dialogues. Adaptive Dialogs is a new event-based addition to the Dialogs library that enables developers to start simple and quickly layer into sophisticated conversation management techniques like interruption handling, which would be difficult actually to deal with when we implement simple dialogue flow. So that can be done easily in the adaptive dialogues. Action and input dialogues are designed to work with adaptive dialogues, and component dialogues allow us to encapsulate and reuse sets of dialogues. The skill and Q&A maker dialogues wrap skills and Q&A maker features as dialogues. We can actually go and, like, if we go and take a look at on all these dialogues, it will take a long time. So let's just take a look at one of them here in the slide, and then I'll show a few of them in the code demonstration when I'll show the demonstration. One of them, just the simplest to understand, is a waterfall dialog. Waterfall dialog is commonly used to collect information from the user or guide the user through a series of tasks. Each step of the conversation is implemented as an asynchronous function that takes a waterfall step context parameter. That will be again more clear in a while here. At each step, the bot prompts the user for input, waits for a response, and then passes the result to the next step. The result of the first function is passed as an argument into the next function, and so on. So you execute all the steps one after the other, and that's how it flows. So before the demo, let's just take a look at the language understanding service real quick, and then that will make our demo a little easier. So language understanding intelligence service is a cloud-based API. It applies custom machine learning intelligence on a new natural language text to predict overall meaning of the text and pull out the relevant information based on that. A client application for LUIS is any conversational application that communicates with the user in natural language to complete a task. Examples of client application can be like social media apps, chatbots, or speech-enabled desktop applications. So if we look at the typical request and response that happens in the LUIS, in this diagram, you can see that user has typed, "I want to call my HR rep." So intention of the user is here to get connected with the HR representative. So if user types that and that goes to the LUIS as the query, what we get here is the top intent, like the intent and the entities. So the intent here is HR contact. That means the HR contact is already defined as an intent in the application in LUIS service. And so based on the text, LUIS is able to identify that intent and gives a score against it. And here the score is quite high, making it the top content. As well as it is able to identify the entities. Like here, the entity can be call type. It can be meeting in person, or call, or SMS, or whatever. So in this case, you can see the response. Based on this response that we got from LUIS, we react in our application saying that, okay, whenever the intent is HR contact, I want to send this text back to the user, which includes the email address as well as the phone number. So that shows the LUIS, and let's take a look at LUIS as part of the demo. I'll first go and look at the LUIS application here, as we just talked about it in the slide. You go to LUIS at luis.ai, and you have to you can use your Microsoft account, and you can create application here. I have created, and you can also create the LUIS service directly from Azure portal. I created this from Azure portal directly. You just have to, it's very simple. It's the normal way we create resources in Azure. So I created a normal event registration bot here, and this service helps me to identify the intent of the user. So I have defined a greeting and a registration register intent here. So if you look at the register intent, I have given some phrases already, and like I want to register for an event in Omaha on May 25th, 4 p.m. So that's what, let's say if the user has typed in so whenever the user types in that, I would identify that as the register intent, and so LUIS should send me back register intent in the JSON that we saw. So you can see Omaha, May 25th and 4 p.m. is underlined here. That's where you define the entities. So those are my entities. So the entities are geography v2 and datetime v2. These are the pre-built entities. You can define your own entities as well, but here you can add the pre-built entities and you get the all the built-in entities here. So I chose datetime and geography for my case. And then you can specify them here and provide examples of what user might type in. You don't have to be very you don't have to provide all the list of all the combinations. Basically it takes in this phrase just to understand, and then it uses its cognitive abilities and trains itself. So when you provide this information here, after providing it, you would see here instead of red, like green, you would see red, and you click on train. Basically the machine learning model gets trained on whatever input you have provided here, and you have to hit on publish to make sure that this is available as a service. You can also test the things, like for example, if I want to test utterance here, I want to register for an event in Omaha. So it identifies it as registered intent, and if you go and look at try to inspect it, you can see that the top scoring intent is register, and you can also see that entities are being identified as, like here, the geography v2 as Omaha. So it identified two things for us, like the intent and the entity. So based on that, we already can, when user typed in this thing, I already know that he's interested in Omaha's event, and I can react accordingly. So I don't ask the user again about which city they want to register the event for, because I already got that. So that's the quick look at the LUIS service. Let's just take a look at our event registration bot code. So I'm sure you might be looking at this and you would say that, well, Sunil, it's the same thing. Really, the bot controller is just the same thing. There's no change in here. So you are familiar with this code. It takes in the adapter class as a dependency and a bot. You already know what an adapter does now, and you know what a bot does, right? So we can look at the startup class and look at those dependencies. So adapter is defined against the adapter with error handler class, and then iBot is implemented as event registration bot, which takes in a dialog, which is the main dialog. So we will solidify all these concepts that we looked in the slide today. So let's take a look at event registration bot here. We can see that it is inheriting from dialog bot, and if we go there, we can see that it is inheriting from activity handler class, and you are familiar with activity handler class, what it does. So let's take a look at dialog bot. So the dependencies here are a conversation state, user state, you know what they are, and they inherit from bot state class, hence I am assigning those the parameters to the local protected parameters here, like protected variables here. So, and what I really want to do here is that when the on-turn async is called, I am calling the base on-turn async here, which basically gives me the ability to override all those classes like on-message activity async. And then once the turn is done, I want to make sure that my conversation state and the user state is saved, and I call the save changes async method. So you might want to link it back to the slide where I was talking about why we need to call the save changes async method. So that's where the dialog bot comes in here and takes care of making sure that the changes are saved, while I can I still call the on turn async from base to allow me to override all the methods that I want to react on based on the activity which is coming in. So event registration bot reacts on a on message added async on conversation update async conversation update activity type. So here you can see the same code which we saw previously, but in this case we are sending a adaptive card. We are sending an attachment. So this is basically a JSON card, which you can define whatever type you want to have in it. Like I am sending having an image and the text block. So defining that, and I'm sending that as an attachment. So you would see how would it look like in a moment here when I run the bot. But then after doing that, I'm saying that I want to run the dialog, and here you can see I'm taking in a dialog as input parameter, which is our main dialog, and here I'm creating that state property. So if we go and take a look at the bot state class for a minute here, just to see the state properties. So that's the framework class. If we take a look at the create property method, if I can go there, it's the create, here it is. So this method creates the property for us, and that's the bot state property accessor which we were talking about in the slide. It has that delete, get, and set methods which kind of take care of maintaining those values for this current turn for the property. And then we like when we end the property, like when we end the turn, we basically save that context, save the state here. So let me go back to event registration here, and we saw that dialog gets called from here, and we are passing the turn context, which holds the all activity related information. So let's go to the main dialog from here. Like the controller goes, control goes to the main dialog after this, wherein I have defined a certain dialog set. So you can see that I have a text prompt type of dialog, and I am also taking in a dialog called registration dialog. So the responsibility of registration dialog is to collect the information, like the name of the user, the city, the phone number, the time, and the event date. So all that information is collected by the dialog, registration dialog, if it is not provided by the user. We'll see that here in a moment. But here I have to define what all dialogues that I'm going to use in the constructor. You can also see that we are taking a dependency on LUIS recognizer, which helps us communicate with the LUIS service. I will talk about it in a moment here, but let's just keep moving forward here. I have also defined a waterfall dialog here. So if you remember the slide, we define steps in waterfall dialog. So each step here is a method that gets called, so one after the other, and each method's response, for example, in this case, that's the first step that gets invoked. We are sending the user this message, what can I what can I help you? You can say something like this. And that message is prompted back to the user. Like through step context, I can call the prompt async method and pass in the dialog ID. In this case, I'm passing in the text prompt type of dialog and the prompt text that I want to pass in. So this will be displayed to the user once this method gets executed. And then once the user types in the response, the next step gets called, which is act step async. And in the step context, you will have the details of whatever the user has typed in. So in this case, what I'm doing is that the user can type in anything here, right? The user can say, I want to register for an event, or user can say, I want to register for an event in Omaha, or if the user knows the date, we can also type in the date. So this is the chance where I can call the Lewis service and try to send the phrase to the Lewis service and get the result back. So here I'm checking whether the Lewis service is configured or not. If it is not configured, then in that case, I'm directly calling the registration dialog, which kind of starts from the beginning. I'm sending an empty object, which is a simple POCO class, taking in like all the details that I want to collect. So I'm sending in an empty object to registration dialog, and I'm invoking that dialog here. So this is how you can call a dialog from another dialog by using the begin dialog async, in this case from the waterfall step context. So here, if it was not configured, I was calling the registration dialog directly and passing in like a new object. But if it was configured, in that case, I want to make a call to the Lewis service, passing in the context here, which will have the phrase that user has typed in. And based on the response, I want to query what the top intent I got from Lewis. And if it is registered, then in that case, I want to collect the information that Lewis has already recognized. So in this case, the user can, if the user knows the date already or knows the city already, I'm collecting all that information and populating it into a registration details object. And that's what I'm passing here when I'm calling to registration dialog here to collect the rest of the information like phone number and name. So that's what this code is doing here. And if the intent is greeting, in that case, I'm just saying hello back to the user. So that's my step number 2, which would begin the dialog of registration dialog here. And once the registration dialog completes, our final step gets executed, which will display the result to the user saying that your registration is successful, and it sends the activity back and replaces the dialog with the initial dialog, which is the main dialog again, and waits for the user again. So that's where it goes into a loop. So if we go and take a look at the registration dialog now, this is again a simple dialog. I have defined the dialog set here. I'm using the text prompt type of dialog, and then I have a choice prompt as well. And I have defined a waterfall dialog. So I'll talk about choice prompt in a moment here. So the responsibility of this dialog is to take the name, city, event date, event time, phone number, and finally end the dialog. So in the first step, we are looking at, so the options property in the step context will have the registration detail object that we passed from the dialog. So if you remember from main dialog, we passed the registration detail. That will be in options property here. And I'm checking if the name is already there in that object, and if it is not there, then I'm prompting the user to asking the name. And then if the name is already there, which will not be, so basically you just move to the next step here. So similarly, so what we do is in the next step, we collect the registration detail object from options property, and then from the context dot result, which will contain the result of the previous step. So here, whatever user has typed into the previous turn, that's what will be populated, and that would be the name of the user. So I'm collecting that information and populating registration detail dot name object here. And I'm then saying that if that object doesn't have city, then ask for that. Otherwise, go and call the next step. So if the city is not there, then I'm using the choice prompt dialog here, which gives us the ability to give choices to the user. So in this case, I'm giving two choices, Omaha and Chicago. If the user is not selecting any one of these or not typing in the name of one of these, if the user types in Kansas, for example, then we re-prompt the user with this message saying that please make a valid selection. So I have used the choice prompt for city and similarly for the date. Also, you can see here how I'm just getting the same object back from options property and evaluating the result from the previous step and filling in the filling in those properties like city, and then in the next case I'm filling in the date, which is when I'm collecting the event. So event time also uses the choice prompt dialog. So, and phone number is simple. It just is simple text prompt type of dialog where I'm just asking the user to provide the phone number, and then I'm calling the final step here and processing the result of phone number. And at this point, I will have all the information collected in the registration detail. So at this point, I'm ending the dialog, and the control goes back to the act step from where it was called, like from here or from here. And then after this, the final step gets called, wherein you're showing the details. So that was a quick rundown through the code. Let's just see and start running this and see. Try to connect to the bot. So the bot is ready. Let me just try and I think I have it already in the emulator. So let me just connect. So you can see this is our welcome.json card, the adaptive card which we saw code for. This is how it would look, the image and the text that you have we provided. So you can see the conversation update activity happened and we got a response message, and you can see the card adaptive. That's the adaptive card with an attachment that we got. Also, you can see that our first step of the main dialog got called, wherein we are asking the user, what can I help you with? And if the user says, let's say I want to register for an event in Omaha on May 30th, 6 p.m. I have the debugger on. So you can see that it went ahead and called register dialog. Now let's take a look at the Luis trace here. So we made a call to Luis. Luis is configured for us already, and let's see what Luis has to say when we passed in this text. So Luis has identified the geography v2 as Omaha. You can see, and also the date time. You can see XXX as the year because I did not provide any year. I didn't code for it explicitly in this demo, but yeah, we can code to make sure that the default year is the current year if not provided. But yeah, you can see here the date time is also identified, and intent is the register intent with a score of 0.99, and this was the text which user typed in. So Lewis was able to identify the intent and the entities, and it sent it back to us. In our code, we can collect the rest of the information. So registration dialog should now collect only rest of the information. So in this case, you can see that it's directly jumped onto the phone number because it already knows what the city is and what the time is of the event. And here's how it would, display your, that's where the final step got called, and we can see it displayed the city correctly, the date and the time. I did not format it, but yeah, you can see the date is the time as well is correct. What happens in case, like, let's say we restart it and let's say I said I want to register for an event. Now this is a different thing. Lewis, if you take a look at Lewis was just able to identify the intent. There was no entity here because it was not provided. So now registration dialog should basically give you the choice prompt dialog type with the ability to select the choices. So you can see it is asking for city, it is asking for date, it is asking for time, and then it is asking for the phone number. And you can see it captures all the information correctly, whatever you passed in, and goes into the loop and asking you what else can I do for you. So you can see how Lewis is coming into picture here and helping us identify the intent of the user, and the bot just feels natural. So let me just show you the recognizer code here real quick. So in the solution, you would see a cognitive models folder wherein I have defined the intent, and this registration class implements a iRecognizer convert interface, which comes from the Microsoft Bot Builder AI Lewis NuGet framework and the NuGet package. And it gives us this, we can implement this convert method here, which has the result from the Lewis, and then we just take that here, deserialize that, and convert into entities and intents. I have defined the entities here, and I have kind of, if you can see that the date time will contain date and time. So I have split the date here and time separately, just to be able to use it easily in the solution. So that's how the Lewis is connected, and you can see here that the registration recognizer basically implements the iRecognizer, and I have the Lewis connection details here. So in the app settings, whenever you create a Lewis application in Lewis portal, you get an app ID, app API key, and the API host name where your Lewis service is hosted. So you basically, that's your connecting points, and implementation of iRecognizer helps us to be able to do that connectivity here. So this code here, you see, does the configuration for us. So those were the points. I think I've covered all the different points here, and let's go back to the slide here. I have to keep swapping my screen here. So the references, most of this content which you saw today comes from Microsoft Bot Frameworks documentation, and there's a great course on Pluralsight by Matt Krusek, if I pronounced his name correctly, building bots with Microsoft Bot Framework. That's where most of the content comes from, and also these like the event registration bot was. Is a slight modification of what you get out of the box as in one of the templates called Core Bot. That was for booking the flight. I just modified it a bit for event registration, and I was able to create that bot with it. So I hope this was the basic session on this. You liked the session, and I'm up for any questions if you have.
We haven't had any additional questions come in, but I did have a couple that I jotted down. Have you built anything interesting with the bot framework?
Not really. Actually, most of this comes from like my interest mostly went into it in the hackathons that I did with my previous employer as well as with the current employer. I did created a bot, and I was kind of amazed how easy it is to deal with, to create bots with such an ease with this framework. But I really did not do any project work as such with it yet. And I hope I will get some work soon.
And I think the other question that I had is, it looked like there were some Azure resources in there, and a lot of times those come with cost.
Oh.
What's the cost for running some of these?
That's a very good question, and thanks for asking that. I just completely missed one of the part, which is deployment. How do you deploy the bot in Azure? So what I did was I deployed this bot, developed this bot locally, and I have deployed it in Azure. So if I'm showing you a resource group which I created in Azure, which has these resources. So you can see the Louis created here. And then I also have something called bot channel registration. That's where you register your bot. And I have deployed the bot as a simple API, right? The way you deploy your simple web API it's just a simple app service. So the app service just looks like any regular simple web API. But if you look at the channel, like the bot channel registration service, that's where you get the chance to connect with the channels. So you can see here we have Facebook, we have Skype. I integrated it in Slack and a web chat. So basically when you click on edit here, for in this case, let me see. This window was open from long time. So if you click on edit, and you get it's a embedded code basically, and you just copy this secret from here, paste it here, and then you can just simply put a this iframe in the HTML page, which is like I have a simple HTML page which is hosting this bot on this address, so you can kind of communicate with it. And this is nothing but the iframe which you just saw here. So that was the web chat bot, and I also integrated it in the Slack channel. So if you see the Slack channel here, I just created specifically for this purpose, and you can see that I have this bot deployed here. This is very easy. I just followed few steps from this article here. And this directly came from Azure, right? In Azure, when you select the Slack as a channel, they provide you with right links to to follow. And I just followed this simple article here and was able to deploy the bot in Slack channel, and that was amazing. So similarly, you have documentation for other stuff here, so that's quite easy. One of the other things that is important is that if you deploy this bot as like a simple web API, and then you can connect it with bot channel registration, then you want to make sure that you specify the Microsoft the app ID and the password to it. So basically, you have to click on manage here, and you get the secret from here, and you can use that app ID and secret in your application. So if I go back to the event registration app in the app settings, you had seen that Microsoft app ID and password. That basically my hosted code has that application ID and password already. For local, I have just commented that out to be able to show run the current local code and show the local stuff. But definitely you can connect to the hosted bot from here. Like if you go here and say open bot and provide the same Microsoft app ID and password here, you can connect to the hosted bot, and you can just interact with that hosted bot right there. Another way to deploy your bot is like when you go and create a service in Azure, and if you type bot, so you can see web app bot, you can directly deploy your bot as a web app bot, which will have the channel in it directly, so you don't have to create a separate channel registration for it. So that's the gist of the deployment. Thanks for asking that, Brian. I completely missed that part.
No problem. I'd like to say that I really enjoyed the presentation, and I thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I really had a great pleasure delivering the presentation.
All right. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.